Welcome into the Whole Hog Pregame Show. I am Seth Campbell. I'll be joined by Scotty Borderline here via Zoom in just 1 second. We'll also be joined by Matt Jones later on in the show. Well, the season is winding down, and this is an all-important game for both of these teams in Arkansas versus Missouri, as the Hogs will travel to Columbia this Saturday and play Missouri at 11 a.m. I bring on Scotty Borderline now. This is an Arkansas team that's going to look slightly different. Rakeem Boyd is opted out of the season. That's some old news, but what is the new news is, well, how are they going to look on Saturday without Rakeem Boyd in the backfield? And I'll give that one over to you, Scotty.
Yeah, we just talked to Sam Pittman at 2:00, and that was, a pretty big topic of conversation. What is Arkansas going to do with the running back that started almost every game for you this season? What's the depth going to look like? And I mean, we all knew that Traylon Smith was going to be the top back, and he's probably going to take a majority of Arkansas snaps at that position. But a little bit, I don't know if surprising is the right word, but it sounds like TJ Hammonds might be in that number 2 spot, according to Sam Pittman. And then, third on the depth chart would be, true freshman Dominic Johnson, who we haven't seen this year. I don't think he's got a carry this year. I think he played against Mississippi State, when I think he spelled Traylon Smith for a couple snaps in that game. But that's a guy that's missed some time. And, I think he's progressing okay, even though he's missed that time. But I think you're going to probably see a really heavy dose of Traylon Smith. And then, maybe TJ Hammonds for a carry or two. I would expect him to play, a little bit more in the slot. And then, maybe Dominic Johnson, maybe gets a carry or two here and there.
Man, this would have been the perfect season to see a guy like Josh Oglesby, a quick guy to get in the game. Unfortunately, he was out at the beginning. Yeah, he was out at the beginning of the year and hasn't played the entire year. But and this almost seems like it would have been a perfect setup for him in a year that you wouldn't have thought he would gotten a lot of playing time. All right, Scotty, moving over to the defense. By all accounts, for as much as that we can infer from hearing from Sam Pittman, the defense is healthier. They're going to get a lot of guys back on the defensive line, which is a big, big key because Missouri likes to run the ball. How do you see the Razorbacks matching up against Missouri on the defensive side?
Yeah, so Sam Pittman was asked about, what are the big keys to get a win against Missouri, which would be the first one, I think, since 2015. I think that was my first year out of college, so it's been a while. And he just said a lot of it's going to come down to, the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Arkansas is going to be getting some, like you mentioned, some defensive linemen back. They were down 5 or 6 guys that are heavy in the rotation. So getting those guys back will be big. And Sam's not sure what is going to happen with Noah Gatlin. He's missed the last couple of games. Sam said that, he's moved well, but they're not sure he's going to get cleared. Arkansas should get Bo Lemmer back on the offensive line too. So good to get at least one of those guys back. That should, maybe help Arkansas a little bit in the run game. But Missouri's pretty tough up front. That's, they're kind of known for that. They've got Akil Byers, a kid from right down the road at Fayetteville High School. So he's going to be, looking to have a pretty big impact. But if Missouri does not give up many sacks, I think it's less than 2 per game this season. So if Arkansas's defensive line, maybe even some linebackers, maybe if you bring a safety down in the box too, if those guys can disrupt Connor Bazelak, you probably think you'd like Arkansas's chances.
Yeah, Scotty, when you look at this matchup, there's storylines galore. The Razorbacks haven't beat, as you said, Missouri since 2015, lost 4 straight. And then if you look at the head coaches, we'll talk to Matt later about Elijah Drinkwitz. But when you look at Barry Odom, former Missouri head coach, Missouri grad, and then he is now with the University of Arkansas and has done a fantastic job with the Razorbacks this year. But when you look at it, his former defensive coordinator is over there as well. There's a little bit of extra motivation for the Razorbacks in this game, like you needed it though, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's probably the same way with some of Missouri's guys. Barry Odom recruited tons of the kids that are on that roster. And, I asked Sam Pittman about, what he's seen from Missouri's secondary this season, because as of right now, Missouri's defense is tops in the SEC in terms of passing yards allowed per game. I think it's around 227, somewhere in there. And a lot of, not all of it, but some of it is a credit to Barry Odom, who, on top of being the head coach there, I think he worked with, guys in the secondary, particularly at the safety spot. So those are talented guys too. And yeah, I mean, coaches can say whatever they want about there's nothing extra that goes into a game, when you're playing your old team, but there definitely is. They want to prove their worth and show that they're doing well at their new school.
All right, Scotty. Well, that'll just about wrap us up here on the WholeHog pregame show. But before we let you go, I need that score prediction. What do you got? And this game is so hard. I'll go ahead and spoil something for you. I didn't even put out a score. I just said who I'm gonna pick, because when I was writing this down and thinking about it, I was like, scores are so hard. There's so many unknowns in this game. I'm just gonna pick a winner. So I'll let you off the hook a little bit. You may not have to give a score, but who do you think's gonna pull out on top?
Yeah, with this one, I don't think we can discredit the benefit of Arkansas having an extra week to prepare and get healthy in this game. And I think Bob Holt wrote in his SEC report this week that the teams that are coming off, maybe a COVID week off and coming off a bye week, they've had some pretty good success. But, I think Missouri's just playing really well right now. Four of their last 5 games they've won hasn't come against the greatest competition, but they're still playing pretty well. Connor Basilak's really solid. I like Larry Roundtree, and Nick Bolton at the linebacker spot for Missouri is really good. An underrated part of this game is going to be linebacker play. You got Bumper Pool, Grant Morgan, who's the only guy in the country with 100+ tackles, and Nick Bolton. He was talking a little smack on Twitter earlier in the week too. So that'll be fun to watch. I think Missouri is probably going to take this one 28-24.
Nothing like a little Twitter smack talk to get you ready.
Something about those Missouri linebackers liking to talk smack during Arkansas week.
Hey, you know what? You can be mad at them if you want, but right now they've backed it up all day long on the field, so you can't really say much about it. Well, Scotty, thanks so much for joining us here on the show. Make sure to follow Scotty at NWA Scotty on Twitter. He'll get you ready for Arkansas versus Missouri. He won't be there, but he'll get you ready for it. And with all the who is in, who is out with COVID, it's been a crazy year for sure. So make sure to follow him and then follow WholeHog Sports on WholeHogSports.com. When we come back from this short break, Matt Jones will join us to talk a little bit more about Missouri. Welcome back into the WholeHog pregame show. I am Seth Campbell. We are joined now by Matt Jones from WholeHogSports.com. Matt's going to give us a little bit more insight into the Missouri Tigers. And all right, Matt, let's just jump right into it. If you're a Razorback fan and familiar with this situation, Eli Drinkwitz from Alma Airedale, and then came up to Springdale. I think you mentioned in the WholeHog podcast that he was there after Malzahn, but he did get connected to Malzahn through Malzahn's adventures at Auburn and Arkansas State. But now he is the head coach at Missouri. And is there any extra motivation maybe from him? And I know you don't know him personally, but you got to think that there may be something there for him playing against the school in the state that he grew up in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's even mentioned that whenever he grew up in Alma, that was when Houston Nutt was coaching Arkansas, and having kind of a revitalization in the Arkansas program, and that he was he liked Arkansas. And you grow up in Alma, and you're going to grow up with people who like the Razorbacks. You know what I mean? And so I'm sure it's a big deal for him and for the people that he grew up for and his family, some of whom are still in that area, from what I understand. On the flip side, I think it's a big deal for Sam Pittman, who coached at Missouri for a year. You kind of get into a point where it's like, which SEC school has he not coached at? This is the third time that he's going to face a team that he used to coach at for at least one season. He's got some ties in Missouri. He was a high school football coach there, began his career at, I think, Trenton and Princeton high schools in the 1980s. I believe his wife is from the state of Missouri, from maybe the Joplin area, if I understand correctly. So I think it's a big deal for both of these coaches from a personal standpoint to be facing a team that they got a little bit of history with. Certainly I think they'll both tell you that come 11 a.m. on Saturday, that's not really what's at the front of their mind. But it's definitely something that I think is got to be something that crosses their mind as they go into this game.
Just a little something extra added to this battle line rivalry. Well, when you think of Drinkwitz, and as I said, mentioned coming from being with Malzahn, you might think of him running that Malzahn offense, but he really doesn't. What does Missouri like to do on offense?
Well, I think that there's some philosophies that he shares with Malzahn, mainly being that they want to run the ball, and I think they want to use a little bit of tempo. But it's tempo is such a prevalent it's such a prevalent thing in football now that it's hard to really tie that to one football coach. He was with Malzahn for a couple of years. I think he might have been a quality control coach at Auburn in 2010 and 11. I know he was on that national championship staff that they had with Cam Newton. He was with Gus, I believe, for his 1 year at Arkansas State. And then he stayed in Jonesboro and got hooked up with Brian Harsin when Harsin came in for the next season at ASU, at A-State, and actually went with Harsin out to Boise State the next year. And so, I think that there's some elements of Malzahn. There's some elements of Brian Harsin. He spent 3 years as Dave Doran's offensive coordinator at North Carolina State before he got the head coaching job at Appalachian State. But I think that, if you boil down, his offense is that they want to run the ball. They want to establish the run. It's Auburn-like in that way, that they want to be able to run the ball. I don't think that you see the quarterback run it nearly as much at Missouri as you do maybe in the Malzahn offense. But, they've got a couple of really good running backs, Larry Roundtree, maybe to a lesser extent Tyler Beatty. And if for Missouri to be good, for them to have success in most games, they're going to have to run the football. The one exception being the win that they had over LSU early in the season, when I think Connor Bazelak, their quarterback, threw for over 400 yards. Every other game where they've won, it's been because they've been able to, win with a good run game. They've been able to, have good success on first down and second down, and keep themselves out of third and long situations. I think if you want to beat Missouri, or let me take that back, I think if you want to slow down their offense, get them in third and long type situations. I think that's how you do it, because they really want to be a team that runs the ball. It reminds me a lot, Seth, of Tennessee a few weeks ago. You remember Sam Pittman making the comments that Jim Chaney, if he was allowed to, he'd probably run it 75, 80 times a game. And that's what you saw from Tennessee. They wanted to run the ball. And, I think that's going to be a very similar deal with Missouri this week. Maybe not quite as much as we saw with Tennessee in the first half of that game. But I think that, there's going to be a real emphasis to try to establish the run against the Razorbacks.
And as you mentioned, if you can get them in third down and long, well, the Razorbacks need to be able to get off the field on third down. That's something they didn't do very well against LSU on the defensive end. Well, flipping it over to the Missouri defense, their defensive coordinator is the same defensive coordinator that was there under Barry Odom, Ryan Walters. Does that play into any advantage for the Razorbacks?
I don't know if there's an advantage there, but Walters and Odom, they go way back. I mean, even to Missouri, when Barry Odom was Justin Fuente's defensive coordinator at Memphis, in 2014, I believe. Then Odom came to Missouri the next year, was the defensive coordinator under Gary Pinkel for a year, and then he became the head coach. And Ryan Walters was with him, every step of the way. And so there's a lot of familiarity there. This is a Barry Odom defense for all intents and purposes that Missouri is running. From the, strictly from the standpoint that Ryan Walters and Barry Odom, philosophically, I think that they are very similar in what they want to do. It's a lot like what we saw last year with Missouri. The three safety looks, for instance, defensively. That's something you see Arkansas do quite a bit this season. So I think that there's definitely a familiarity there. Does it help one side over the other? I don't know, but I think that Ryan Walters and Barry Odom, are probably in their offensive team meeting rooms some this week and saying, look, here's what this guy likes to do in 2nd and 7. Here's what he wants to do in 3rd and 4 at this part of the field. And so I think that there's got to be some picking of the brain this week, so to speak, trying to maybe find tendencies, find out as much as they can about these defensive coordinators in both staffs.
That makes sense. Not necessarily knowing what exactly they're going to run, but maybe some tendencies of them. I think that is a great way to put it, Matt. All right, well, let's wrap it up here on the Whole Hog pregame show. It's time for score prediction. What do you got in the battle line rivalry?
Boy, it's tough. In our last magazine, we made these predictions the morning after Arkansas's game against LSU, and at that point, we thought they were going to play the next week, and both of these teams were really struggling with COVID numbers. If you remember, Missouri played South Carolina, I think, with 52 scholarship players, and Arkansas played LSU with 56, and so it turned out to be Arkansas that couldn't field a team last week. I think Arkansas can win, but I'm actually going to go against what I said in the magazine. I picked Arkansas to win in the magazine. I think I would pick. I think I'd pick Missouri right now for the simple fact that they just seem to have a little bit of momentum right now, and the momentum has definitely been stopped on Arkansas's end. I mean, their last win was November the 7th. It's been almost a month ago. That was the Tennessee game. They did not look good against Florida. They were missing a lot of players against LSU, but they didn't look particularly good against LSU either. They had a chance to win, and I think that tells you about maybe how down of a year this is for LSU, that Arkansas was able to play so poorly in that game and still have a chance to win it. But gosh, you look at Missouri, beat Vanderbilt 41-0 last week. That's the type of performance you want to have against a team like that. Didn't play so well against South Carolina the week before against an interim head coach. I think it's a toss-up, Seth. But the fact being that Missouri does seem to have a little momentum. They are playing at home. I tend to think that they've got a chance, or their chances are good to win this game. I think for Arkansas, it comes down like it always does to, can they force turnovers? You look at their wins this year against Mississippi State, they had 3 interceptions, took 1 back for a touchdown. Against Ole Miss, they had 6 interceptions, took 2 back for a touchdown. Against Tennessee, they forced a couple of fourth quarter turnovers in critical times. And so in their losses, they really haven't been able to force turnovers like that. And so I think that's the key for Arkansas this week. Can they force turnovers, and can they do something with it when they force a turnover? If they can do that, then I certainly think Arkansas's got a chance to win. I just think that Missouri's got a little bit more momentum right now, and then playing at home is certainly an advantage too.
Yeah, this is a game that if I was a betting man, I would definitely stay away. Too many factors in this game that could swing it one way or another. And so I totally agree with you, Matt. You mentioned our Hogs Illustrated predictions. I believe that I predicted Arkansas to win 2 weeks ago, but I'm right on the fence of deciding who I pick. I think I'm going to still stick with the Hogs because I said that they were going to win 2 weeks ago, but mainly that's the reason why, not because I think that they're necessarily the better team, because Missouri has the momentum, as you mentioned. So it really is a toss-up to me. It could go either way. You mentioned the turnovers for Arkansas's defense. They're going to be without Jalen Catalon for the first half of the game against Missouri, so that'll be something to look out for, see if they can handle that. Who's coming back? Sam Pittman said that he believes that a majority of his team will be back from COVID protocols, but who are they missing? That could be a key factor in this game as well. And then I can't take credit for this, but Scotty Borderline brought up a really interesting stat. Arkansas was so poor on 3rd down against LSU, and that's really when it stood out. But it's really been all season long. In Arkansas's losses, they have been on offense. They have converted 3rd downs at around 20% clip. So it's just above 20, but they're in the 20%. I can't remember the exact percentage. And Arkansas's wins, they convert in the 40s and 40% or greater. So that's something else to keep an eye out for, is the fact of it. Can Arkansas execute on 3rd down to keep drives going, which keeps the defense off the field and keeps the offense on the field? And for Kendall Briles, his offense is all predicated on keeping that momentum and keeping the defense on the field so that you can be sped up. And if you're going 3 and out multiple times or can't convert on third down, then that doesn't bode well for really either side of the ball. So something to keep an eye out for as well. So I'll stay with my pick for Arkansas. I'm not going to give a score because I'm pretty sure my score in Hogs Illustrated was a little exaggerated over what I would pick right now. But I think that I'll stick with the Hogs. Matt going with the Tigers. And, as we said, we could definitely see this going either way. All right. Well, shout out to Matt. Thanks so much for joining us here on the WholeHog pregame show. Really appreciate you, Matt. Appreciate you for listening and watching as well. If you like the show, you can follow us. This is on YouTube as well, but you can also follow us on the WholeHog podcast. Some great information there. And then on WholeHogSports.com. Well, for Scotty Bordelon and Matt Jones, I am Seth Campbell saying so long. Thanks for joining us. We will see you back here next week.